Name's Kai, 17. In a village like mine, 17 and useless is the kind of thing people say loud, so the neighbors can nod along. We make things here. Smiths, carpenters, potters. The street never shuts up. Hammers, axes, the wet smack of clay. Everyone's got a craft. Me, I've got a voice. That's the whole list. I sing, high, clear, wrong for a man, they say. People wince when I walk past. They've been wincing for years. I stop noticing. Mostly. My father is Goran, best smith on the road, and he knows it. So when he ended me, he didn't yell. He set the hammer down. Somehow that was worse. You know how old you are? He said, calm as cold water off the anvil. You still think there's time left in the day to become a man? I said nothing back. Big mistake. To Goran, a silence is just an empty mold, and he poured his numbers into it, one by one, the way he pours everything. Slow, deliberate, impossible to argue with. 17, he said. Martin, my little brother, was forging real steel at 14, 3 years younger, already worth more to the house than the singing boy ever was. The street heard every word, the street agreed. Then he dropped the number that actually drew blood. 3 years since mother died. 3 years since this house heard a song and didn't go stiff. He hadn't heard music since we buried her. Only the time I was burning through, I understood it, standing right there. Understanding it didn't help one bit. I couldn't raise you alongside your mother, he said, loud, for the whole street to hear. So let the wild places finish the job she started. Go. And still, nobody in that crowd moved a muscle. Nobody moved. The potter stared at his wheel. The carpenter's boy found his own feet fascinating. 40 people, and not one of them said the word wait. So I walked. Kept waiting for a hand to land on my shoulder, all the way to the last house. Funny thing, it never came. By dark, I'd quit pretending I had somewhere to be. I just walked, counting. Counting is the only thing my head does when it's scared, and my head was very scared. No coins, no food, no blade worth the name, no trade, no teacher, no roof. My whole life, added up, fit inside one breath, and the breath shook. One knife. Father slipped it in my bag without looking at me, cursed me with his mouth, saved me with his hands. Still couldn't tell you which one he meant. I found a tree, low branch, thick enough. I looked at it longer than a person should ever look at a branch. I had a belt. It had the branch. The math just sat there, patient. Then clack. Metal on wood. Hard. Flat. Close. Somebody was nailing something to the next trunk over, and they were not being quiet about it. A traveling merchant didn't so much as glance my way. He slapped a square of parchment onto the bark, hauled his pack up, and strolled off into the dark like I was furniture. I crept over and read it twice before the words finally held still. Royal Singers Contest, it said. The capital. The winner takes a seat at the king's court. Entry shuts in 8 days. A seat at court. Food. A roof. A name. Everything the village swore I'd never have, nailed to a tree, free for anyone with a throat. I laughed, and it came out ugly, more cough than laugh. 8 days, sure. I almost admired the precision of it. Only family lands a joke that clean. The capital is 12 days on foot. I knew that road by heart, from back when I still let myself dream about it. 12 to walk, 8 to enter, do that math. It wasn't a door, it was a joke somebody hammered to a tree, and I was the only fool in the woods around to get the punchline. I sat down under that branch again. Not a plan, my legs just quit on me, and the cold ground came up to meet me. And then I did the one thing in this world I'm actually good for. I sang. Not for anyone, there was no one. I sang because my mouth needed a job that wasn't sobbing. No words, just the tune. The one I used to give her. Quiet first, then louder, because the dark wasn't going to complain about it. A bird dropped onto the branch over my head, then a second, then 3 more, lined up in a row, like I'd rung a dinner bell. I cut off mid-note to stare, and every bird lifted and vanished. Huh, I sang again. Back they came, same branch, near enough the same order. The hair on my neck stood up and would not lie down. Coincidence, I told myself. Then a hare strolled out of the brush and parked 1 boot length from me, ears straight up, staring like I owed it rent. I dropped the tune low and slow. The hare leaned in. I flipped it high and sharp. The hare bounced back 2 hops and froze. Down, up, closer, back. I said it out loud because saying a thing out loud is how I make it true. You move when I sing, I told the hare. You move where I sing. Branches cracked, heavier this time. Out of the black walked a horse. No saddle, no rope. No owner. Ribs showing, runaway from somewhere. Eyes nailed straight to me. It came right up and stood at the edge of my voice. Would not leave while I held the note. A whole horse, standing still, for a song. I'd never touched a horse that wasn't somebody else's property. I stood up slow, kept the tune going, laid a hand on its neck. Warm, real, not a dream. I stopped to breathe, and its ears went flat, weight shifting back, about to bolt for the trees. I sang. It settled where it stood, like I'd reached out and flipped a hidden latch. not luck, not a fluke. 5 birds, 1 hare, 1 half-starved horse, all strung on the same thread, and for once in my life, I was holding the other end of it. 17 years I'd been the thing the village couldn't use. Now here was a thread only I could pull, with the one tool they'd all mocked. I had no word for it yet. I only knew it was mine, so naturally I tried to get on. First go, I sailed clean over the top and ate dirt on the far side. The horse turned its head and looked down at me, no judgment in it, which stung worse than judgment. Don't, I told it, spitting out a leaf. It did not laugh. Small mercies. I picked myself up, brushed off what dignity I had left, and decided the two of us would start over. Second go, I kept singing, fist in the mane, and dragged myself up still humming through my teeth. The horse actually walked, under me, because of the song. I nearly cried and nearly whooped and managed neither. Third go, I tried steering, rising note for right, falling note for left. The horse turned exactly where the music pointed. I almost fell off again, this time from laughing like an idiot. Then came the part that changed my whole life. I stopped singing to breathe. Horse slowed, birds scattered, the hare was long gone. Song off, beasts off, started up again, everything came back. The horse leaned into a faster step, so that was the rule, the whole rule. Voice on, they're mine, voice off, they're wild. No in between, no fine print. I did the numbers out loud, same as father at his anvil. Old habit, dies hard, 12 days on foot. But a galloping horse swallows a day of walking in about an hour. Maybe 120 hard miles to the capital. A horse at full gallop does that in a day, not 12. 1. I didn't have 8 days. I had one, if my throat held. And it wouldn't, not for a whole day straight. A voice is not a pair of legs, so ride in stretches, stop at streams, cool the throat, ride again. A plan built out of absolutely nothing. Even riding, I felt the edge of the thing. My whole new fortune lived in one muscle in my throat, and muscles tire. I tucked the worry away and rode on. A problem for a boy who lived to see tomorrow. I aimed the horse at the road and sang us up to a gallop. Birds skimming my head, 2 hares racing the ditch, then losing. I knew exactly how ridiculous I looked, loved every second of it. I hit the capital at sunset, stopped singing a good way out, and the whole circus emptied off me. Birds up and gone, horse drifting back into the trees. I walked the last stretch alone, on purpose. A boy with a beast parade does not get waved through a city gate. A boy alone maybe, so alone it was. 2 guards stood the gate, one big, cleaning a nail with his knife. The other called him Brecht. Brecht looked me up and down. Rags, no sword, no papers, no purse. He took his sweet time with it so I'd feel every inch of the look. The contest? He said. You, in that? And then he laughed. The second guard grabbed the laugh and ran with it. A few townsfolk turned to enjoy the free show. Of course they did. I said something back. Don't even remember what. It came out small, and small was exactly the wrong size to bring to a gate like that one, on a night like that one. Brecht swung the gate shut in my face. The bar dropped on the far side with a sound like a judge sitting down. Heavy. Final. Come back with papers, coin, and clothes that don't stink, he said through the wood, savoring every word of it. Or don't bother coming back to this gate at all. I stood there, the dark settled on the wall. I counted, because what else was I going to do? 0 coins, 0 papers, 0 clothes anybody would let through. 7 days to the contest. The wall, 3 times my height. But I leaned my forehead on the cold gate and hummed, barely a breath of the old tune, just to hear it once more, just for me, in a city that had already locked me out. And from the far side of that wall, deep in the city, a horse answered, one long whinny. Out of the whole roaring capital, it picked my voice out and called back. The wall didn't stop it. The gate didn't stop it. Brecht had locked me out of a city that was already, quietly, listening for me. I quit humming and grinned at a shut gate like a madman. 7 days left. There's a crack in everything, my mother used to say. I just had to find this one. Something answered. Not the horse this time. Lower, closer, on my side of the wall. A cat slid off a barrel and looked at me like it had been waiting all night for some entertainment. I kept the hum going low. The cat trotted ahead, tail up, glancing back now and then to check I was still coming, like a guide who had done this before. It walked me along the wall to the old gate, and there it was, a gap in the stone, low and dark, half hidden behind a dead bush. You're showing me the way, I whispered. The cat sat down in the hole like that settled the matter, and as far as it was concerned, it did. I crawled through on my belly, knife-scraping rock, and came up filthy and inside. My first time ever in a city. It hit me all at once, more than I had room for. Narrow streets stacked on streets, smells, smoke, bread, horse, something frying I couldn't name, noise pouring out of taverns like the buildings themselves were drunk. A patrol turned the corner ahead. 2 guards, a dog on a rope. I went stiff against the wall, heart trying to climb out through my throat. So I sang, tiny, a thread of sound aimed at the dog. The dog's head snapped the wrong way and it hauled its guard off down a side street, nose down, chasing nothing at all. Then the gods threw in a bonus. A pigeon dropped out of the dark and planted itself square on the second guard's helmet. He swatted. It stayed. He cursed and spun in a slow circle while I slipped past behind his back. I followed my nose and the cat's general direction until I found them, the royal stables, warm, hay, a long row of huge calm animals. I folded into a black corner and was asleep before I finished the note. I woke up to half a bucket of cold water in the face. Not a threat, just a girl watering the horses who hadn't checked the dark corner first. We stared at each other. She didn't scream. That was the first thing I learned about Mira. Everybody in my life had two faces for me, pity or disgust. She had a third one. Plain curiosity, like I was a problem worth solving. How'd you get in? She asked. Not how dare you, just how. Hole by the old gate, I said. Ah, that one. Nobody's bothered to fix it in 3 years. She looked me over, then looked at her horses, all calm. Nothing kicked over, nothing stolen, no tack missing. She did the math faster than the guards ever would. You're not a thief, she decided out loud. Thieves don't sleep in the cheap corner, and they don't sing the horses quiet on the way in. I told her about the contest. The word came out of my mouth and just hung there, stupid, in a royal stable. She didn't laugh, which I appreciated. She did something worse. She got honest. You know who enters that? Lord's sons. Trained by court masters since they were 5. Real voices, real teachers, 10 years of it. And you slept in horse dung. Fair. Every word of it fair. So I didn't argue the point. I sang instead, one low phrase, barely anything at all, just to show her what I meant. The gray mare pulled against the rope, walked the stall, and laid her head on my shoulder. Heavy and warm and deciding I was fine. Mira went very quiet. She looked at the horse, then at me, then at the horse again. Fine, she said at last. One night, not a day more. She came back with bread and water anyway. I ate the bread too fast and made it last too short. First food in 2 days. I caught myself licking crumbs off my palm and decided I wasn't going to be ashamed about it. Then I did my favorite useless thing. I counted what I had, out loud, while Mira mucked stalls a few feet away and pretended very hard not to listen. 0 coins. Couldn't buy a button, never mind a singer's clothes. 0 papers, no name the gate would take. 6 days now, not 7. The knight had already eaten one. Allies. I looked at Mira. Half of one maybe. She'd given me a night and bread. Not a vow. I didn't round up. Rounding up is how you get yourself killed. What I did have, one knife, one dry corner that smelled of hay, and a thing no lord's son with 10 years of training had, a throat that pulled animals out of the dark. That was the whole ledger, a joke of a ledger. But for the first time, it had a roof on it, and a name on it, and that was more than the gate had left me holding. The room she gave me was barely a room, more of a square apology above the tack shelves, but it had a latch, a blanket, and silence. I lay there counting every sound below, horses breathing, leather creaking, Mira moving like she owned her place in the world. 6 days suddenly felt huge and tiny at once. 6 days, I said, 1 room, 1 friend who hasn't decided yet. I'm not your friend, Mira said, not turning around. Half a friend. A quarter. I'd take a quarter. A quarter was infinitely more than 0, and I knew exactly what 0 weighed. I'd been carrying it since the village. Mira said if I was going to haunt her stable, I could at least be scarce in daylight. Fair again. So I went out and did the one thing that's free in a city. I listened. The capital was filling up for the contest. You could spot the singers a street off, velvet, servants carrying instruments like newborns. Boys my age who'd never once gone to bed hungry, running scales as they walked. I leaned on a wall and collected names like a pickpocket. One kept coming up, always with that little drop in the voice people use for someone above them. Ariston, son of Lord Ferrant. The favorite. Trained by the courtmaster himself since he was a child. 10 years of it, they said, the way you'd say 10 generations. Then the man himself rode past, white horse, white coat, the kind of clean that costs more than my whole village makes in a season. And his eyes found me leaning on my wall. He didn't sneer like Brecht. Brecht's contempt was loud, a guard's contempt. Ariston's was quiet, bored, certain, the contempt of someone who has never once had to raise his voice to be obeyed. A beggar, he said, to no one and everyone in the street. Move along. You're dirtying the road just by standing where decent people walk. His retinue laughed on cue, the way paid people laugh. A couple of passers-by glanced at me and silently agreed with him. He rode on without waiting to watch me move. That was the insult tucked inside the insult. I didn't move. I stood there and learned his face the way I'd learned the horse. Slow, deliberate, on purpose. Ariston, right. I filed him next to Brecht and walked on. I kept listening, and by afternoon, I'd pieced the whole machine together out of overheard gossip and a crier bawling the rules in the square. 2 rounds. First the selection, you sing before a panel of judges and they cut the herd down to a handful. Survive that, and you reach the final, where you sing before the king himself. The prize was what the tree had promised: a seat at court, a singer's post with wages, strip off the gold paint, and it meant the 3 things I didn't have: food, a roof, and a name people say without spitting. So I stood in that square and added up my odds honestly, because lying to myself was a luxury I'd left behind in the village, with everything else. No trained voice, no technique, I didn't even know the words for the things Ariston could do, no repertoire, no teacher, no coin to buy any of it in 6 days. By every count that mattered, I was already out. By every count but one. Every other throat in this city did the same trick, just at different levels of polish. Mine did a trick none of them could do at any price. The judges wouldn't care about a yard full of birds, but I was starting to suspect the judges weren't the only thing in that hall worth winning over. I went back to the stable as the light went orange. Mira was forking hay. She watched me come in, watched me drift straight to the horses, watched me start humming without even meaning to. She didn't say a word. She just watched, like she was finally taking the problem seriously. That night I stopped marveling at the gift and started taking it apart. 6 days, I couldn't spend one on wonder. I tested it on the pigeons in the rafters, one rule at a time, saying each result out loud so the lesson would stick in my head. Slow and low, they settled, fluffed up, drifted toward me, calm, come. Fast and high, they burst off the beams, wheeling, wired, and alert. Move. And when I dropped pauses into the line, they froze on every silence, like the gaps between the notes were orders to stop. The whole grammar of it. So it wasn't a miracle and it wasn't a curse. It was a language. The animals already spoke it. I was just the one human born with the accent. 3 commands I could do on purpose now. Come. Stop. Go. 3. Against Ariston's 10 years, 3 sounded like nothing. But 3 was 3 more than I'd had the morning before. Trouble is, pigeons don't respect a training schedule. I had a dozen of them swooping the stable on my notes, and Mira was trying to fork hay underneath the entire air show. Could you not? She said, ducking, a feather stuck in her hair. I'm working, I said. You're conducting birds in my barn. That is the work. She blew the feather off her lip and gave up on me. You're strange. Yeah. But the horses love you. The horses don't love anybody, so that means something. Best thing anyone said to me in 3 years. I didn't tell her that. Later, packing it in, I caught a slice of the palace through a crack in the stable boards. A noble crossing the yard to the great doors, silk that probably cost a whole farm, a walk that had never once in its life been told to move along by anybody. I didn't know his name yet. I would learn it soon enough. Valen. I didn't know he'd be the one. I just felt my jaw lock up looking at him, the same way it had at the gate, and I couldn't have told you why. 6 days left, and one of them already gone. I went to sleep humming the old tune, something I hadn't done since before we buried my mother, and for once the sound did not hurt me. It was the kindest theft anyone had ever done on my behalf. I rolled the sleeves 4 times and went to put my name in. The registration table sat under the hall steps. A scribe with ink-stained fingers looked up and found no paper, no servant, no instrument, no teacher at my elbow. His pen actually stopped. Name, origin, teacher's name, he recited. Kai, village of Gornet. No teacher. The line behind me did that low laugh again, the city's favorite sound where I was concerned. The scribe wrote it down like it pained him. Ariston drifted past in something silver, on his way to somewhere important. He stopped just long enough to be heard. Oh, the beggar actually came, he said, almost delighted. Let's see how long you last in the first round. He didn't wait for an answer. They never do. My number was 23, and there were 23 of us. Last in, last to sing. Of course I was. I ran the only numbers that mattered. 22 of them with schools and masters and years behind them, one of me in a borrowed shirt. 8 seats in the final. I'd faced worse odds. I just couldn't remember when. The audition hall had 3 judges, all court musicians, all wearing the face of men who'd heard every voice in the kingdom and been bored by all of them lately. The singers went in order. Ariston sang second. I'll be honest, because lying is cheap, he was good. Clean, placed, every note exactly where he said it. The judges nodded along like it was owed to them. Then I waited through 20 more. Every one of them had an instrument, or at least a school, holding up the sound. By the time they called 23, my mouth was dry as the road home. I walked out, and the room murmured the second it saw the shirt. A judge didn't even look up from his papers. Instrument? No. Teacher? No. Then begin. So I began, quiet. For the first few bars I could feel the whole room leaning in, waiting for the exact moment it got to laugh at me. The moment never came. The voice was high, that part was true. That part is always true. But it was clean. and there was the other thing under it, the thing the village never heard, because the village never once listened. I didn't reach for anything clever. I had nothing clever. I sang my mother's tune, the plain one, the one I'd given the dark under that hanging branch. It was all I owned, so it was all I brought. Outside, the birds went silent. Then 3 of them flew in through the open windows and settled on the high rail, quiet, like they'd paid for seats. The judges looked at each other. The room forgot to breathe. I finished the phrase and let it go. Silence. A full 3 seconds of it, in a hall that came to laugh. One judge wrote something. The second nodded. The third just stared at the birds. Next, I walked out with no idea whether I'd lived or died. At midday, they posted the list on the same kind of board that had ended my old life. I made myself read it slow, top to bottom, so the disappointment couldn't jump me. 7 names I half knew from the gossip. Then the 8th line. Kai, village of Gornet. Last of the 8, dead last, on the list. I read it 4 times. 8th out of 23, with no teacher, no instrument, and a shirt that wasn't mine. I didn't whoop. I just let my heart do something it hadn't done in 3 years. Ariston came to read the same board. He found his own name near the top, where he expected it. Then his eyes slid down, the way you can't help, all the way to the bottom. He saw the 8th line. He saw my name on it. His jaw set so hard I could see the muscle jump from across the yard. He'd sung circles around me and we both knew it, and the board didn't care. He walked off without a word. First time he'd passed me, and hadn't had one ready. I filed that away too, right next to his name. The final was that night, in the great hall, in front of the king and the whole court. The ceiling alone stood taller than the tallest roof in my village. 8 of us. I was last again, naturally. Ariston sang first and he was, I'll grant it, magnificent. The hall rose and clapped, and he drank it like he'd been thirsty for it since birth. A hard act to follow, maybe an impossible one. Then they called me, and I walked out into all that gold. King Edric on the high seat, beside him a noble in deep red, the same smug walk I'd watched cross the yard from a crack in a stable wall. He leaned to the man next to him, said something behind his hand, and they both smiled the way you smile at a dog about to do its trick badly. So that's who you are, I thought, watching him whisper behind his hand. I still didn't have a name for him. I'd have one before the night was out. And then I did something I'd never once dared in 17 years. I didn't hold anything back. In the village I'd always sung small, sung careful, sung sorry. Small was safer. Father flinched at the sound. Not here. Here, I opened the whole thing up and let it fill a room that was built to be filled. The side door of the hall swung open on its own. Through it walked a deer, not running, not afraid, just walking into the king's own hall like it had been sent for. Then the windows. Birds poured through every open one, dozens of them, a whole sky, wheeling up under the gold. A hare hopped onto the banquet table and sat among the king's fruit like it held the deed. I'd never made a sound that big in my life. It came up from somewhere under my ribs, somewhere the village had spent years stamping flat, and the gold ceiling threw it back down at me twice as loud. The court came apart all at once. A lady shrieked. 2 guards reached for their swords and found nothing in the room to point them at. Somebody laughed, high and helpless. Half the nobles stood up, unsure if they were watching a miracle or a catastrophe. One of the afternoon judges was there at the rail, the one who'd stared at the birds. He wasn't bored now. He was on his feet with the rest, gripping the wood, watching a beggar's boy conduct a whole sky. I kept singing through all of it, because the moment I stopped, the wonder would curdle into a riot. The deer crossed the length of the hall, slow, between toppled chairs and frozen guards, and stopped right beside me. It turned its head and looked at me. Not at the crowd. At me. Eye to eye. Close enough to touch, calm in a room that had lost its mind. Something passed between us that I had no word for then, and still don't. I held the last note until my breath ran out, and let it fall. Silence dropped on the hall like a stone. The noble in red was first on his feet. This is a disgrace. Get these animals out of the... King Edric raised one hand. Just the hand. The noble's mouth kept moving half a second, then quit. The whole hall went still on a single gesture. So that was power. The real kind. The sort that never has to raise its voice. I made a note of that as well. The king didn't speak right away. He studied me a long time, the way you study a tool you've never seen and can't quite name. The deer's ears flicked. Without the song, the animals were fraying at the edges, so I hummed, low, under the quiet, and the birds streamed back out the windows. The hare bolted, the deer turned and left by the side door it came in. I handed the room its order back, on purpose. Let them see I could take it and give it back. Edric watched. He missed nothing. When the last bird was gone, he finally spoke, and his voice carried without trying. The winner, King Edric said, and the whole gold hall held its breath to hear the name, is Kai, of the village of Gornet. The nobody. No applause this time. The court didn't know how to clap for that, so they stared instead. Ariston stood frozen, beaten by a boy in a borrowed shirt and a flock of pigeons. 6 days ago, this city shut a gate in my face. Now the king himself had said my name, and the name of the village that threw me out. I wanted Goran to hear it. I wanted the whole street that watched me leave to hear it. They didn't. But the king had. After, they took me to a smaller room with a fire and a door that shut. Just the king, the noble in red, and me. I'd never been in a room that quiet that wasn't also empty. Edric was courteous. He offered everything at once, a chamber, proper clothes, wages, a standing place at his court. Won fairly, he said, and he seemed to mean the word. You won fairly, he said, and seemed to mean it, but we would like to discuss your rather particular gift, you and I, in private. The way he set that last word down made my skin itch. I nodded anyway. I didn't have the shape of it yet. I only knew the room held 2 kinds of wanting, and they were not the same kind. The king called the man in red Valen, and Valen watched me the whole time, not with the old contempt. Worse, he looked at me the way father eyed a bar of good iron, measuring what it could be beaten into. I knew that look. I grew up under it. It's the look that doesn't see a person. It sees a use. Something pulled tight in my chest and would not let go. Valen spoke to me only once that night, and softly. A remarkable instrument, he said, as if I weren't standing in the room. The crown has never owned one like it. I didn't know the word yet. I knew the eyes. King Edric smiled and called it a gift. Valen had called it an instrument. 2 words for the same throat, and even half asleep, I knew which man I would have to watch. I said yes to the room, because a boy with 0 coins says yes, but late, through the wall, I heard Valen's voice, low, talking to someone who wasn't the king. How many head of livestock, he said, could one man take in a single day if the beast walks right up to you on its own? I lay in the finest bed I'd ever touched and stared up at the dark ceiling. Behind the wall, the question just hung there in the air, refusing to settle. Not how well can the boy sing. How much meat can we haul out of the forest, with a boy who makes the prey walk up to us and wait? I'd won. So why did it feel like a gate had just swung shut again, softer this time, and behind me instead of in front of my face? The crown spent 800 gold a month on hunters, he said. Dozens of men, paid whether they dragged meat home or came back empty-handed, as they mostly did this lean year. The game was thin this year, he went on. Prices in the city were climbing by the week. The advisors nodded along. Old news to them, all of it. Then me. If I sang, the game walked in on its own. No beaters, no chase, no luck. The cost of a full larder dropped 10-fold. He tapped the figure twice. 400 extra head a month, at what the slaughter yard already handled. 2,000 gold on top of the savings. He said the numbers the way other men say prayers. I did the arithmetic he left unspoken. 800 gold saved, 2,000 made. That was a whole town's year, hung on one boy's throat. Numbers that big stop being numbers. They turn into a leash. I sat there and asked the only question worth asking. The one none of them had thought to. And the animals? What happens to them? Valen looked at me the way you look at a child who interrupts. They're animals, he said. Food. A resource. That's all they have ever been. The king let Valen handle the cold part, then stepped in soft, the same gentle voice he'd used behind his raised hand in the hall. You'll have 1/10 of it, Edric said. More than any courtier in this palace earns in a year. More than your father earns in 10. He said your father like a man who'd had me looked into. Maybe he had. Either way, the word landed exactly where he aimed it. I didn't say yes. I didn't say anything at all. My whole life I'd been the useless mouth, the one that ate the bread and gave nothing back. Now the king himself was telling me my throat was worth a fortune, and all I had to do to collect it was open my mouth. Valen took my silence for a yes. Men like Valen always do. To them, a quiet man is just a man who hasn't been handed his number yet. They'd built a pen outside the walls, high fence, one wide gate, a chute. I didn't understand the shape of it until I was standing in the middle, and by then I couldn't ununderstand it. I sang. They came, deer stepping out of the tree line, boars, even a pair of wolves, all of them walking toward my voice across the open ground, trusting it. That was when I saw the men behind the fence, bows, long knives, aprons, already dark. The pen wasn't a pen, it was a throat, and I was the thing that fed it. I understood the design in one look. The wide gate fed them in. The chute held them close. The aprons did the rest. Every piece built around the one thing only I could do, make the prey walk in singing. Wait, I said to Valen, the truth arriving too late. This is wrong, stop this. Valen didn't even turn his head. You took the money, he said. Sing. I sang. The animals filed in through the wide gate, calm, because my voice told them it was safe. The gate dropped behind them. I turned my back. I couldn't turn off my ears. I sang them in, and kept my eyes hard on the tree line, so I wouldn't have to watch the gate. It didn't help. A voice carries both ways. I heard everything I had called them into. every note of it. That evening, a steward counted 30 gold coins onto my palm, one by one, like they were nothing special at all. To him, they weren't. 30 gold. For one afternoon, my father broke his back at the forge from dark to dark and didn't see 30 gold in a month. I made it standing in a field, singing the song my mother taught me. I sat on the fine bed in the fine room and waited to feel rich. I dreamed of not being hungry my whole life. Now I held the cure for it, stacked and cold. I put the coins in a box and shut the lid on them. I knew exactly what each one had cost, and it wasn't me who'd paid the price for it. The second session was the next day. The third, 2 days after. The killing found a rhythm, and rhythm is how you survive things you shouldn't survive. But I noticed something. Some of them came back. The ones that slipped the gate last time, that should have run forever, they walked toward my voice again, because to them my voice had never been the thing that hurt. And one of them came every single time, without fail. The deer from the king's hall. I'd have known it anywhere, in any crowd, in any light. It would step out of the trees, find me in that crowd of doomed animals, and look at me, the same look it gave me in front of the whole court. So, I cheated. With the pen full and the hunters busy, I'd bend the melody, a thread of sound only it would catch, and send it back into the trees before the gate came down. Just that one. Every single time. I told myself one saved was better than none saved at all. I told myself a great many things that month. It cost me to do it. A half beat of loosened song, one heartbeat of confusion in the pen, timed so the gate watchers wouldn't catch the gap. A small mutiny, sung under my breath, for one animal out of hundreds. Valen noticed the gap in the count before I thought he would. He looked at me and said nothing. That was worse than if he'd shouted. They gave me a watcher, and of all the men in the kingdom, Valen picked Ariston. He stood at the edge of every session with his arms folded, enjoying every minute of it. It was Valen who found the word first. Not singer, not even boy. One evening, watching the gate drop on a full pen, he said it plain to his clerk. The flute is working well today. Ariston took the word like a gift and made it a song. The flute plays for its keeper, he'd say, loud, to anyone near. Valen is very pleased with his flute today. A flute, not a man with a gift. A thing you pick up, blow into, and set down when the tune is done. The court took the word from him the way fire takes dry grass. The village had called me useless. This was the opposite, and somehow worse. Useful, owned, and named after the tool I'd been turned into. Mira found me at the stables that night. I went there when I couldn't stand the palace, which was every night by then. The horses didn't call me a flute. You know what they say about you up there? She said. I can guess. That the king's got himself a living whistle now. You call them in, the cooks do the rest. I didn't answer her. Nothing I said would have made a single word of it untrue, and we both knew that. A box of gold, and a month ago you had nothing, she said, quiet, and you look worse now than when you crawled through that hole. Kai, leave, take it and go, before this is the only thing you are. I told her the king's singer doesn't just walk out the gate, she knew it, but she'd said the word out loud, and it sat in my chest all night. Leave. She didn't push it. Mira never pushed. She left the word sitting there between us, no speech attached, the same as she left the bread. Take it or leave it. I left it. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. A week in, I did my count again, the habit I have never been able to shake. This time the numbers made me want to stop counting things for good. 7 sessions. Around 200 animals, I'd lost the exact figure, and not knowing was its own answer. 210 gold in the box. And 0 freedom. 0 days that were mine. The richest I'd ever been, and the least free I'd ever been. Both at once, in the same week, in the very same ledger. And Valen was already growing the plan. Bigger game next, he said. Bears, the mountains were full of them, and the hides fetched a small fortune apiece. And after bears? I asked, because I needed to know how deep it went. Wolves. Predators in time, he said. Their fur is worth 3 times the venison. And he smiled, like he was offering me a treat. He wasn't running a hunt anymore. He was building an industry out of my throat, and I was the only machine in the kingdom that could run it. And here was the thought that kept me awake. The better I got, the bigger his plans grew. My skill wasn't buying freedom, it was forging a longer chain, link by link, and I was the one holding the hammer. The next session, the deer came again. Of course it did, it always would, and I started to bend the note to send it home, the same as every time before. This time, Valen stood at my shoulder. He'd stopped trusting the gap in his count. He heard the change in my voice before I had even finished making it. You're doing something to that one, he said. On purpose. No, don't lie to me, boy. You've been thinning my numbers by 1 all week. I didn't have a lie good enough for him, and he saw that too. He always spotted the gap before I did, every single time. He raised 2 fingers to a hunter at the fence, not toward the pen, toward the deer, standing in the open, calm, looking at me, trusting the voice that had always kept it safe. "Stop," I said, and I moved for the fence. Valen caught my arm, stronger than a man behind a desk had any right to be. "Don't interfere with the work," he said, almost gently. It was over fast. "They're very good at their work." The deer dropped in the grass where it stood, still half turned toward me, toward the sound. Valen let go of my arm, muttered about sentimentality, and walked off to check the count. I didn't move for a long time. The hunters left, Ariston left, Valen left, off to weigh hides and tally coins. The field went quiet, just me, and the place in the grass where it had stood. A flute doesn't choose the song. Someone lifts it, blows through it, sets it down again. Kneeling in that bloody grass, I finally understood the word Valen coined and Ariston sang. And worse, I understood I had let it be true. I knelt down beside it. I don't know why. To say something, maybe, though I had nothing to say and no one left alive to hear it from me. That's when I saw them, beside the deer's tracks, pressed into the soft ground, a second set, half the size, set close to the big ones, the way something small walks beside something that keeps it safe. It hadn't come to those sessions alone. Every time it found me and let me send it home, it had been keeping something hidden in the trees, something little enough to leave a track like that. And today, I hadn't sent it home. Today, I'd only watched. I stood up slowly and looked at the tree line. For the first time since I won that contest, I wasn't thinking about coins, or the king, or what I'd become. I was thinking, instead, about what was still out there in the dark, waiting for a mother that was never coming back to it now. The field still smelled of the day's work, of blood and trampled grass. I made myself walk past it, into the trees, to the place where the small track had gone. Then I did the gentlest thing I know. I sang, not a command, not the call I used at the pen, soft and low, the tune my mother used when I couldn't sleep, the one that only ever meant safe. It's a different thing, singing to call than singing to command. I wasn't ordering anything out of the dark. I was only making the one sound that, to a small lost thing, might still mean its mother. I sang it into the dark, and waited. 10 minutes. 20. My knees went numb on the cold ground. I kept the note going anyway, because stopping felt like giving up on something I hadn't earned the right to quit. Then, a rustle in the dark. Small. Careful. Bushes shifting at a low height, the kind no full-grown animal would ever brush against. Only something little. I held still and kept singing, barely a breath of it now, and it stepped out. A fawn, spindly legs, spots still on its back, ears too big for its head, alone, looking everywhere for something that wasn't behind it. It saw me and froze. I didn't reach for it. I kept the tune low and let it decide for itself. A long, long minute. Then it took one careful step toward the only safe sound in the world, and then another, until its nose bumped against my open hand. I knew then, the way you know a thing in your gut before your head agrees to it. Its mother wasn't coming. Its mother was a tally mark in Valen's count, and I had watched. It made a sound against my palm, a small, breathy thing, half a bleat. So, that was the whole of what it gave me. So, all right so, I said, and my voice cracked clean through on a name I'd invented half a second before. All right. So it is. I sat in the cold, with a motherless fawn leaning its whole small weight on me, and I did not feel like the king's prize singer. I felt like the knife that did the cutting. I walked it back to the broken wall and got it, somehow, to understand. Wait in the brush. Stay. I'll come back, I told it. I keep this one. I swear I keep this one. Then I went back inside, to the finest room I'd ever slept in, and sat on the cold floor of it until the window went gray. By morning my head had stopped spinning and started counting. The trick it falls back on whenever I'm scared. It was the worst count of my whole life. On one side of the ledger, 210 gold in a box, good clothes, a warm roof, a name the king himself had said out loud. On the other side, around 200 dead in a single week, a fawn in the bushes with no mother left to it, and a word, flute, Valen's word. The awful part was how exact it was. A flute doesn't pick the song. Someone takes it up, blows through it, sets it down, and the music is neither the flute's fault nor the flute's credit. It plays when it's pressed. My mother sang, not for coin. Not because anyone made her. She sang because there was a song in her, and it had to go somewhere. That was the whole difference. And I'd handed it over for 30 gold a session. And there it was. The thing I'd circled all night. I'd become my father, doing what I was told instead of what I meant. Except Goran's work fed people and built things. Mine emptied a forest and orphaned a fawn. I stood up. I was done being an instrument. I didn't pack like a thief. I packed like a man, taking exactly what was his, and not one coin more. 210 gold went into a belt pouch. I'd earned that in the worst week of my life, and out here, I'd need every coin of it. I left the rest of what the palace gave me, the fine coat, the soft boots, all of it. A gift from an owner isn't a gift. Off the wall I took one thing that wasn't mine. The kingdom map, pinned up by Valen's own clerks. Roads, garrisons, forests, passes. I told myself I'd only borrow it. A man running for his life is allowed one theft. I rolled it tight and slid it into my shirt. Then I stood in the middle of that gilded room and felt, for the first time in 3 weeks, almost clean. I owed one debt in that whole city, and it wore a stable apron. I found a scrap and a stub of charcoal and left it where Mira would find it. 4 words, and no name signed under them, all I trusted myself to write without putting her in danger for knowing more than that. Thanks for the horse. Then I fetched So from the brush. And I left the same way I came in. On my belly, through a crack in the wall, into the dark. They found the empty room sometime after dawn. I was already deep in the trees by then, but I didn't have to be there to know how it went. I'd watched Valen want things for 3 weeks. I'd left him a perfect story. A boy who could call the king's own game, loose in the woods with the crown's map in his shirt. Valen didn't need it true, only believed long enough to hunt me. The story reached me later, in pieces, which was how all my news came now. The king was cold about the theft. Valen was not. He's seen the map, Valen would have said. He knew exactly what I'd taken. He knows where the garrisons sit, where the patrols thin. That's no runaway singer. That's a traitor carrying the crown's secrets in his shirt. The order came down hard. Find him, bring him back, or bring back proof. Treason has one sentence, and it isn't exile. I'd gone from useless mouth to wanted man in a single season. And of all the men they could send, they sent Brecht. The same Brecht who'd laughed me off the gate. 20 soldiers under him, ordered to comb the forest road by road. I almost laughed at that. The man who'd told me to come back with papers and coin was now under orders to drag me back with neither. The kingdom kept handing me the same faces, like it wanted every insult remembered. I didn't see the soldiers. I saw the birds. 3 days into the trees, I'd started reading them without meaning to. When the woods were calm, the birds spread out, easy, picking at the open ground. When men moved through, the birds lifted and bunched and complained, a moving smudge of alarm sliding along beneath the canopy. That morning the smudge sat on the east road. By midday, it had crossed to the north, lines of men, sweeping the roads. I didn't need a single scout. I had 10,000 of them out there, working for free, and not one of them knew it. They're closer than I'd like. So, I said. The fawn flicked one ear and went back to the grass. Helpful as ever, that one. So I went deeper, where the map showed no roads, and the garrisons gave up. Away from the smudge, into the green dark, where Brecht's 20 would have to come single file and slow. I had time, not much, enough. And it struck me, walking, that knowing where every man in the forest stood, just by watching what the animals did, might be worth more than every sword those 20 carried. I tested the idea as I walked. A jay scolding meant a man on the east path. Crows lifting in a sheet meant horses. The forest had been talking the whole time. I'd just never had a reason to learn its language. That evening I stopped in a clearing because my legs gave out, not because I chose it, so folded down beside me, and out of habit, out of grief, out of nothing at all, I sang. No command, just the tune. I didn't expect the clearing to fill. By the time the light went orange, hares waited at the edge, birds lined the low branches, and a fox watched with its tail curled, drawn in close, the way they always came to me now. Then the trees on the far side of the clearing went still, and a wolf stepped out of them. Everything in me said run. A wolf, alone, at dusk, watching. The hares should have scattered. They didn't, because I hadn't stopped singing. And the wolf didn't charge, because I hadn't stopped singing. My whole body wanted to run, and running was the one thing that would surely kill me. The song was the only wall between a hungry wolf and a sleeping fawn, so I did not stop singing, not for anything. I let the note die in my throat, just to see. The wolf didn't leave. It stood there, yellow eyes on me, deciding whether I was food or something stranger. So I sang again. Careful, low and slow, the come and be calm shape, the same one that settled a frightened horse a lifetime ago, and prayed a predator would hear it the same way a horse did. The wolf's ears came down, its head lowered, and after a long, long moment, it sat. A horse, I'd half expected by now. A wolf was something else entirely. I sat very still, a wild wolf 20 feet off and a fawn asleep against my leg, and did the new math out loud. Quiet, so I'd believe it. One wolf. First contact, only the start of it, but a wolf. Around 20 smaller animals that came when I sang and scattered when I stopped. 3 melodies I could steer on purpose. 1 knife, 1 stolen map, and 210 gold that, out here, couldn't buy a single thing the forest didn't already hand me for a song. That was the joke of it. The richest week of my life, worthless the moment I stepped under the trees. Out here a different currency ran things, and I was the only man alive who knew how to mint it. And that was the thought that turned me around. Every lord in that kingdom raised an army the same way. Coin, conscription, fear. Men who'd rather be home, I didn't need an army of men. I was sitting in the middle of one that never had to be paid, or fed from stores, or talked into dying. It wasn't a wild idea, it was the only idea I had left. I couldn't outsword the kingdom, but I might outsing it. If a song could raise something no blade could cut down, and no purse could buy off. The wolf rose at first light, and slipped back into the trees, and I felt the loss of it far more than I had expected to. Then, as the sun went down again, the brush moved. The wolf had come back, and this time it had brought 3 more with it. 4 wolves total, which felt less like a visit and more like a decision. Gray did not come to me. The others drifted to the edge of my song, but he sat back in the trees and watched, and the watching had weight to it. I tried everything I had on him. He answered 3 shapes. 1 put his ears up, 1 laid him down, 1 turned his head away. The rest he ignored on purpose, the way a captain ignores a recruit giving orders. That was the trouble. Gray was a leader. Leaders don't follow whoever hums at them. He wanted proof, and the proof a wolf respects is strength, and a wolf would open my throat before I finished the thought. He'd had a life before me, that wolf. You could read it in the scars. He wasn't about to hand it over to the first creature that made a pretty noise at him. Fair enough. I respected him for it. So I'd be the other thing instead. Not stronger, smarter, the one who sees the move a breath before it happens and is already standing where it lands. I spent an hour quietly herding a hare into a bush at the clearing's edge, with a thread of song Gray couldn't see the point of. Then, I sang the sharp go note and pointed dead at the bush. Gray's head came around, doubting. The hare bolted out exactly where my finger aimed. He looked at the bush, he looked at me, and the suspicion was gone. It was a trap, and I'd built it. That, a wolf understands. From that morning, Gray followed, not like the others did, but like a partner checking my work. He'd do a thing, then look at me, as if asking whether I'd have called it the same way. Usually I would have. The monkeys I didn't call. The monkeys just showed up, because monkeys show up. 12 of them dropped out of the canopy to see what the singing animal was about. Their leader came first, and he came grinning. I named him Fang for the crooked tooth that stuck out whenever he made that face. Where Gray weighed every step, Fang had never weighed anything in his life. He walked straight up and tried to lift my bag off my shoulder. I sang the sharp note. He let go, sat back, and gave me a look of such deep personal betrayal you'd think I'd robbed him. Training Fang's troop was its own special punishment. They did everything. None of it was the thing I asked. I sang surround and pointed at a stump. They surrounded it, then, delighted with themselves, started building a monkey pyramid on top. I sang freeze. 12 monkeys froze beautifully, everyone, for 5 whole seconds. Then a leaf moved somewhere, and they were all gone. Gray watched the whole show from the shade, with his ears flat. I have never in my life seen an animal so embarrassed to share a forest with another. The wolf and the monkey did not get along, not even a little. This was a war all its own, and it was one I had not thought to budget for. Gray treated Fang the way a veteran treats a clown who's wandered into the war tent. Pure contempt, and wolves don't hide it. It's all in the ears and the flat, still stare. Fang took this as an invitation. Of course he did. One afternoon, while Gray lay sunning the notch in his ear, Fang crept up slow and theatrical, reached out one long finger and flicked it. Gray came off the ground with a snarl that emptied the clearing of birds. Fang shrieked, vaulted clean over so, and landed behind my legs, clinging to my knee and peering out like I was a wall built for his protection. I am not a wall, I told him. He disagreed completely. So, who had slept through the whole disaster, bolted to the far side of the clearing. I stood there between a furious wolf and a hysterical monkey, and understood I hadn't built an army at all. I'd started a family, and families fight. But that fight taught me the most useful thing I learned all week. I'd been trying to make them the same. That was the mistake. They weren't the same, and that was the point. Gray was precision. Send him at one target and it was already finished, silent, exact, no waste. He was a blade. You don't ask a blade to be funny. Fang was chaos. 12 monkeys couldn't hold a line to save their lives, but they could swarm, screech, steal, throw, and turn order into panic in about 4 seconds. That isn't a flaw. In the right spot, that's a weapon all its own. So I stopped trying to bend the chaos into a straight line and started thinking about where I'd want a blade, and where a riot. A blade for the throat of a thing. A riot for the confusion. I didn't have soldiers who all marched alike, and I'd stopped wishing I did. I had specialists, and specialists, used right, beat soldiers. I'd learned that watching trained singers lose to a boy with a flock of pigeons. That was the whole shape of it, not a herd that did one thing badly. A set of tools, each one wrong for every job but a single one, and right for that one beyond any argument at all. That night, I did something I'd never bothered with. I wrote it down. I couldn't read music, never had a lesson in my life, so I made my own, scratches on a strip of bark with my knife point. A rising line for a climb, a fall for a drop, dots for the sharp notes, a long gouge for a held one. Ugly, but mine. By firelight, I laid out everything I could do on purpose. come, stop, go. Attack that one, surround, freeze, forward. 7 shapes, up from the 3 I'd crawled out of the city with. 7 felt like plenty until I pictured a real fight, then it felt like nothing. So I started a second list, the holes in the first. I needed a quiet, to move without a sound. A scatter, to break apart and vanish. A hold, to pin a thing without killing it, because a dead enemy tells you nothing. And a retreat that wouldn't curdle into a rout the moment it got loud and frightening. 4 more shapes, at the very least, maybe 5. Because the gift had a floor, and I'd found it the hard way. After about 2 hours of singing at full strength, my voice didn't crack for show. It thinned first, went rough, then quiet, then gone altogether, and the further down it went, the less the animals listened to me at all. That scared me more than Brecht's 20 did. A sword doesn't tire in the middle of a fight. My whole weapon was one muscle in my throat. It had a budget, and I'd never measured it because I'd never had to. So I trained it the way father trained an apprentice's arm. Every morning, 1 hour at full power, pushing the point where it thinned a little further out with each day, scales until so stopped looking up, held notes until I saw spots. Boring, aching work that nobody watched, which is exactly the work that wins things. I started timing it against the sun. 1 hour came clean. Past that, the edges frayed. Past 2, the wolves stopped minding me at all. 2 hours. That number became the wall every plan of mine would have to fit inside. Then the forest handed me something I hadn't asked for or earned. I found it by pure accident, which is the best way to find anything worth keeping. I was singing low, too tired for full strength, and a sparrow on a near branch caught the tune and chirped it back, not random, the shape of it. A second sparrow, further off, heard the first one, and answered it. Then a third, well past where my own voice could ever have reached. The song was traveling, bird to bird, jumping outward, long after my own voice gave out, passing it down the line like men shouting a warning along a wall. I sat up so fast I startled. Because that wasn't a trick, that was a system. If a melody could ride the birds outward, a warning could ride them back. I spent 2 whole days building it on purpose. Birds posted in the high branches in a ring around the clearing, each one close enough to hear its nearest neighbor, a living wall of ears. 3 weeks ago, I read troop movements by watching birds panic. Now I had birds that would tell me the moment anything bigger than a fox crossed my line. It changed how I slept. For the first time since the village, I didn't lie awake straining at the dark. The dark had ears now, and they were mine, posted in a ring, listening all night long. 3 weeks in the trees had changed the shape of fear. I sat by the fire and did the count I'd been avoiding, because numbers don't let you lie to yourself when pride starts making speeches. Before, the night I crawled out of the city, 0 animals that were mine, 3 melodies, 1 knife, a patch of open forest and a stolen map. Now, 8 wolves under gray, 12 monkeys under fang, around 30 birds strung out as ears, 1 fawn who followed me into every stupid thing I did, 7 melodies and climbing, and a camp. An actual camp now, with a wall of running water down one whole side of it. And that last part, the water, wasn't even my doing. I'd sung a family of beavers calm one evening, and woke to find they'd turned my muddy stream into a pond and a dam I never asked for. I just let them. Best perimeter a fugitive never paid for. The 210 gold sat in the pouch, untouched. Out here it bought nothing. But used right, in the right town, I had a feeling it might buy the one thing the forest couldn't. I tucked that thought away. 210 gold buys no loyalty in a forest. But a town is not a forest. Somewhere out there was a smith, a tanner, a market, things even a boy with an army of teeth would still need before the end. The news came in on a peddler's cart. Mira had found a man who ran goods to the forest villages and trusted him with a folded scrap and a coin she couldn't spare. 3 lines, in her blunt hand. Valen's raising men, not Brecht's 20 now, a proper company. He's telling the court there's a wild beast tamer loose in the woods, turning the king's own game against the crown. 3 weeks from the order to the march. A beast tamer. They still thought I was a man with a clever trick and a sack of food. They were counting my wolves the way I'd counted them 3 weeks back, and getting a small, comfortable number. I read it twice and didn't feel afraid, which surprised me. I felt that cold, clean thing from the contest hall, the second before I opened my throat all the way. I unrolled the stolen map by the fire, the forest, the roads cutting through it, and to the west, a long narrow gorge where the road squeezed between 2 stone walls, the kind of place an army has to enter thin. I looked at it a long time, that thin seam in the stone. 3 weeks. And I started, at last, to think like the hunter instead of the hunted. I didn't sing a command, I sang careful. Bears aren't wolves, and they aren't monkeys. They think slow and they don't spook, and the sharp note that froze a monkey just made a bear blink at me. So I built them their own melody, low, slow, a heavy rolling rhythm, more drum than tune. 3 days of patient failure, before the biggest one finally lumbered toward me, instead of away. I didn't need much from them. Stop, come, and the one that changed the camp, carry. A bear drags a log I couldn't shift with a rope and a prayer. By week's end, my lean-to was a walled shelter with a roof that held the rain, raised on timber no man could have hauled alone. Beavers shaped the wet side. 3 bears made the rest an afternoon's work. What would have cost me a month of dragging and cursing, they did between meals, never once knowing they were raising a fort. That night, I ran the roster by the fire, because uncounted armies surprise you in a fight. 8 wolves under Gray, 12 monkeys under Fang, 3 bears, who needed no leader because nothing argues with a bear, around 30 birds in the high ring, watching the dark, 9 melodies now. I'd finally cracked a quiet, the one that moved them without a sound at all, and the bear's carry made the 9th shape scratched on my bark. 23 animals that would fight, plus a wall of feathers that would warn me. 3 weeks ago, I'd had a fawn and a wolf at the edge of a clearing. I let myself feel that for exactly 1 breath. Then I got back to the part that wasn't done. Each of them could follow a command. They couldn't yet do it together. Because a command is not a battle. I'd been teaching them single words. Now I needed whole sentences. Orders that ran one into the next without a gap. I laid it out on the ground with stones and drilled the one thing I knew was coming. Men on the road. Step 1. The birds catch them first and raise the alarm. Step 2. The wolves slide wide to the flanks. Step 3. The monkeys take the trees above. Step 4. The bears close the road behind so nothing walks back out. Birds, then wolves, then monkeys, then bears. A sequence, not a shout, each part waiting on the one before it, every piece moving on its own separate note. In my head it was a beautiful thing, silent, layered, a closing jaw with no gap anywhere in it. I lifted my voice and ran the first rehearsal. It was a catastrophe. A complete, glorious catastrophe. The wolves heard the flank note and went early, because waiting has never lived inside a wolf. The birds, seeing the wolves move, gave up signaling and just watched. I cued the monkeys into the trees. Fang led all 12 up the same pine, and the whole thing ended in a shrieking heap of blame. The bears were still ambling toward the wrong end of the road entirely. One of them stopped, sat down, and began to scratch itself against a tree. Gray looked at me. I swear, on everything, that wolf gave me a flat yellow stare that said, plainly, you cannot be serious. I'm serious, I told him. Nobody believed me, including me. The second run was somehow worse, which I hadn't thought possible. But by the third I could see why, and once you see why, you can fix it. The trouble was timing, and timing is just patience taught to a body. So I broke it down. Birds and wolves only, over and over, until the wolves learned to hold, until the birds called. Then, the monkeys. Then, last of all, the slow bears, who turned out the easiest of the lot because they were never once going to be early. By the 5th run, a week on, it worked. Not cleanly, not the silent jaw of my daydreams. But the birds called, the wolves held, the monkeys swarmed on cue, and the bears shut the road. The trick was never the animals, it was the order. Hold the wolves half a beat, let the birds finish the warning. Time it right, and 23 animals shut like one hand. Time it wrong, and you had a brawl. Rough, loud, and functional. I'd take functional. Functional is what wins fights. But the week cost me. Packed that close, drilling that hard, Gray and Fang's Cold War ran hot. It was the resting hours. The monkeys couldn't leave the wolves alone, pulling tails, dropping twigs, that endless monkey need to poke the thing that might kill them. Gray bore it for days, longer than I'd have managed in his place. Then Fang went one flick too far, and Gray was on him, jaws wide, done being patient. I hit them both with the stop note before teeth met fur and then sang the thing I needed them to believe. You're both staying, I told them. Low, the calm shapes under the words. I need the blade. I need the riot just as badly. I don't need the two of you to like each other one bit. I only need you to win on the same day. Gray backed off. Fang slunk behind my legs. Neither liked it. Both stayed. That, I was learning, is most of what command is. While the army squabbled, the eyes kept growing. The bird ring reached past the camp now. 5 kilometers of forest, give or take. Each post passing the next one's song. And I'd stopped just hearing it. I'd started reading it. Flat, easy chatter meant empty woods. A spike of alarm in the north quarter meant something moving north. The size of the panic told me the size of the thing. I could sit at my fire and know, without rising, that a deer crossed the east stream, or a man walked the north trail. The royal patrols were out there, prodding the forest's edge, and the birds showed me everyone. They hadn't found the camp. It sat off the roads, behind water, ringed in ears. They were hunting a man. They didn't know they'd walked into his net. The peddler came again, a folded scrap tucked in with the salt. Mira's hand, shorter this time, Valen's holding the company in the city, waiting on men from the southern garrisons before he marches. 10 more days, the talk says. 10 days. I turned the number into a schedule, the only thing it was good for. 10 days to finish what I'd started. 10 days to turn a rough band into something that could meet trained soldiers and walk away. I burned the note in the fire, same as all the others, and started spending those 10 days in my head. Worth saying plain where I stood, because it still didn't feel real said out loud. 3 weeks ago, 8 animals, 7 melodies, a stolen map, and no plan, but stay alive. A boy called a flute, who half believed it. Now, 23 fighters, 9 melodies, a walled camp behind a beaver pond, 5 kilometers of eyes, and a tactic that worked if I stayed patient. Not a flute. Not a beast tamer with a sack of food, whatever Valen told his court. A commander, a small one, in a forest, with an army nobody could see coming. I wasn't done. I was just, for once, ahead. Then the south net lit with something I'd never felt before. Not alarm. Awe. The birds went strange and hushed over a stretch of southern forest, the way a crowd hushes for something huge. I went to see, and a few kilometers out I stopped dead. Elephants. 4 of them, young, a small lost herd, stripping leaves off the high branches like it was nothing. I'd never seen one, never heard one. I sat at a distance and watched, because I had no melody for a thing that big, and no idea where to start, so I started slow, slower than anything yet. I sang from far off and didn't take a step closer. The first day, one of them turned its ears toward me. That was the whole victory, and I let it be enough. Because I'd already done the math, and the math was staggering. One of those could do the work of 20 soldiers. 4 of them, and there wasn't a gate in the kingdom that would stand. 1 elephant is a battering ram with a mind of its own. 4 is a moving wall. I had no melody for them yet, and they trusted me even less, but I could already see the gate they would bring down. That night, the elephant still, afar off maybe, I sat by the fire, and so lay against my side, near grown now, the spots fading off his back. I sang the old lullaby, soft and low, my mother's tune. The one that only ever meant safe. So lifted his head and pressed his nose to my jaw, the exact way he had that first night in the brush. And I finally let myself say out loud the thing I'd known since I knelt in that bloody grass and found the small track beside the big one. You're hers, I said, the doe from the king's hall, the one that found me in that doomed crowd every single time, and let me send her home, until the day Valen made me stand there and watch instead, so didn't understand the words. He understood the tune, and he stayed. The thing I'd been carrying since that field finally had a name, and the name made me very, very still. The peace didn't last. It never does around Fang, who has never once let a solemn moment stand without finding some way to ruin it. 2 days on, while I worked the elephants closer, Fang decided the biggest one was a climbing frame. The elephant did not understand what was happening to its leg and began to panic, and a panicking elephant is how clearings become meadows. I had to hold 2 things at once. Stop at the monkey, calm at the elephant. 2 different shapes, 2 different keys, sung in the very same breath. I'd never once tried it. It came out a strangled mess, and my voice tore halfway through. But it worked. Fang dropped. The elephant settled at last. I stood there hoarse as a crow, a hand on my throat, having learned 2 things, that I could run 2 songs at once, and that doing it might cost me the only weapon I had. That was the night the real problem showed its face. I could fight with 1 song. A battle would need 5 or 6, braided together, for as long as it lasted. My throat had already shown me its floor. I was still rubbing it and counting the cost when the whole north net screamed at once. Not chatter, not the spike of a lone deer or a single patrol. A long rolling wall of alarm, the whole northern arc going up at once, panic-handed post to post toward me faster than any man could run. Something big was on the north road, moving, many, in order. I'd been counting on 10 days. The birds were telling me I didn't have 10 hours. Valen hadn't waited for his southern garrisons. He'd marched early, the way you march when you've decided a beast tamer in the woods is a small, simple problem you'd rather just be done with. He thought he was coming to put down a runaway with a sack of food. I called Gray to my side, listened to my whole forest scream, and felt something close to grateful. Ready or not, it was time. Time for Valen to learn what a flute had built out there in the dark while he counted his gold and his men. 20 men, not 40, not 60, 20, moving in a loose line up the north road, careful, the way men move when they're hunting something they haven't found. Scouts, a forward party, sent ahead to sniff out the dangerous beast tamer and his sack of food before the real company risked the woods. And at the front, broad shoulders I'd have known anywhere. Brecht. The crown had put the man who shut a gate in my face in charge of finding me. The kingdom really would not stop handing me the same faces. 20 trained soldiers against 23 animals. In an open field I lose that, and fast. Armor and steel against teeth, on ground that suits them. I'd run that math a dozen times and it always came out the same. On open ground, 20 soldiers in armor cut my animals down and barely slowed. I never let myself forget that. The animals weren't stronger than men, they were only better placed, if I placed them right. But the north road didn't stay open. A few miles on, it threaded into the western gorge, between two walls of stone, where 20 men have to walk thin and slow. In the gorge, it was a different sum entirely. The gorge didn't care how many men Valen had. The mouth fit 4 men abreast, no more. Past 4, every extra sword behind them was just a man waiting his turn to be useless, so I didn't wait for them to come find the camp. I went out to the gorge instead and set the table for them myself. I'd walked that ground 100 times in my head since the night I first unrolled the map. Now I walked it on my feet and put everyone where the plan wanted them. Wolves up on both slopes, low and flat behind the rocks, out of sight until the flank note called. Gray took the left himself, unasked, the way he took most things now. The monkeys went into the pines above the gorge mouth, stiller than I'd ever seen them, which is to say not very still at all. The bears I set deep at the far end of the gorge, the cork that would seal the bottle once the bottle was good and full. Then I did the part that mattered most. I walked into the middle of the road, alone, in plain sight, and sat down. No weapon, no cover. One boy on a road, exactly the small, simple problem they'd come looking for. Bait has to look like bait. The trick is being the only one who knows it's a hook. Everything hung on one thing. They had to believe the boy in the dirt was the whole of it. No army, no plan, just a runaway too tired and too stupid to keep running. They came around the bend and there I was. The line stopped. Brecht pushed to the front and I watched him place my face, the rags boy from the gate, sitting in the dirt like he'd been dropped there. You, halt. His hand went up, then dropped to his sword. In the king's name, boy, on your feet where I can see you. I stayed sitting, and I smiled. That was the new part. The part that surprised even me. The boy at that gate 7 weeks ago would have stammered. I just smiled because I knew exactly how the next 10 seconds went, and he didn't. You're alone? Brecht almost laughed. You came alone. You think one boy is going to. And then I sang. Quiet. Barely a thread of it. The pines came alive. 12 monkeys dropped from the branches at once, shrieking. The thing they'd drilled best of all was this. Jam helmets down over the soldiers' eyes. Fast, everyone, before panic found room to turn into order. 20 grown men, suddenly blind and yelling, swinging their swords at empty air, tripping over each other and going down in the churned dirt. Then the slopes moved. Wolves poured down both walls, low and silent, and made a ring. They didn't bite. They didn't need to. Gray padded through the chaos and sat, calm as a church, directly in front of Brecht. Brecht clawed his own helmet up. A monkey kept shoving it back down, and looked, at the wolves, at the bears filling the far end, at me. You, the flute? He said. Flute, I agreed. Interesting word, isn't it? And there it was, the thing I'd waited 7 weeks to see. Fear, on the face that laughed me out of a city. 7 weeks I'd carried that gate shutting in my face. Now I watched the same man work out that the rags boy he'd laughed at owned the ground he stood on. He didn't laugh this time. Nobody died. That mattered to me more than I let show. We bound them with camp rope, hands in front, gentle about it. The monkeys took guard duty seriously, perched over the prisoners with furious little faces, occasionally stealing a buckle. One unlucky soldier got his bootlaces knotted together by a grinning monkey, and didn't quite dare complain about it to the boy who now held his life. Brecht talked fast, the way a practical man talks when the matter is plainly settled. I didn't have to threaten him. He'd done his own arithmetic and lost. Valen comes himself, he said. 5 days from now. 40 men, maybe more. He's not sending scouts next time. He wants you in person. Why himself? Because you embarrassed him. The flute that walked off on its own. He told the whole court he'd bring your head back on his saddle. He means it, boy. Literally. In his hands. 5 days. 40 soldiers. Valen on a horse at the center of them, riding in to collect a head. In an open field, 40 men and me. In the gorge. Only if I could get them in. Valen wasn't a fool. He would not march good men into a stone throat without a reason worth the risk. He'd skirt it, burn the woods, starve me out, unless he had a reason to come straight in. Unless coming straight in was the prize. So I gave him one. I crouched down to Brecht's level. You're going to walk out of here, I said, all 20 of you, and you'll tell Valen exactly what he wants to hear. That you found me. That I'm alone, half-starved, hiding in a gorge with a few mangy dogs. That I begged, and said I'd surrender to him and him only. Brecht studied me a long moment. You want him overconfident. I want him to think the hard part is already done. A scared boy ready to kneel, waiting in a dead-end canyon alone and shaking. An easy win a proud man rides in to claim himself, so the court hears he took it alone and forgets to ask why it feels too clean. That was the hook. Not strength, not mystery, not some clever lie with too many moving pieces. Just Valen's pride, sharpened and handed back to him point first. Brecht didn't jump at the offer. Smart man. And if he doesn't believe me, he said, Valen kills me for coming back empty and feeding him a story. You're asking me to gamble my neck on your reading of him. I'm asking you to gamble it on the truth, I said. I am alone. I am one boy. He does want to take me himself. You'll be telling him almost exactly what's real. The only lie is the dogs. He was quiet a while, then slow, he nodded. He does want it personal. Said so at the camp gate, in front of everyone. The singer is mine to break. He'll come. God help us both. He'll come. So I let them go. All 20 of them. I think that shook Brecht more than the wolves had. He'd come to drag me to a block, and here I was untying his men and pointing them home. Mercy, when a man is braced for teeth, lands like its own kind of blow. Why, he said. You had us. Dead to rights. Clean. Because I'm not the flute anymore, I said. Nobody plays me now, and because dead men can't carry a message back to the man who needs to hear it. I took one thing off them, a single sword from the nearest belt. Not to use it, I'm worse with a blade than I am at lying, and I'm bad at lying. I took it as a keepsake, proof to myself that the men who came for my head went home and left me their steel instead. At the mouth of the gorge, Brecht stopped and looked back. The others walked on. He didn't, not yet. You sat there, he said, in the middle of the road, smiling, like you already knew how it ended. I did know. How does a boy with no army know that? I looked up at the slopes, wolves melting into the rocks, monkeys already bored, bears yawning at the far end, my whole invisible army putting itself away. A cat that knows exactly where the mouse is doesn't have to rush, I told him. It can sit, it can even smile. The mouse is the only one in a hurry. He'd come to the woods, sure he was the hunter. He left knowing he'd walked into something with rules nobody had told him. That, more than the wolves, was what I wanted him carrying back. Brecht shook his head slowly. 7 weeks back he'd told me to come with papers and coin, or not at all. He said nothing like that now. He turned and walked out of my gorge and left me the road. Then it was me and the math again, and this time the math had teeth. 5 days. 40 soldiers, maybe more. Valen at the heart of them with a whole quart's worth of pride on the line. My 23 could take 20 startled scouts in a stone funnel. 40 ready men who'd been warned the woods were dangerous was a different beast. I needed everything. I needed the elephants, and the elephants weren't ready, weren't close. 4 young giants who'd only just decided I wasn't a threat. And I needed the thing I'd never once managed clean. The symphony, every species, every melody, all at once, woven together without my voice tearing through the middle. I'd held just 2 motifs at a time before, and gone hoarse doing it. This would be 5, maybe 6, held together for as long as a battle lasts. 5 days to learn the one thing that had nearly cost me my voice, and to do it under steel, with lives on every note. That night, So came and stood at my feet by the fire, near as tall as me now, watching the way he watches when I go quiet. I'd been turning something over since the gorge, and I finally said it to him, because he was the only one who'd truly earned the hearing of it. Your mother taught me a thing without meaning to, I told him. She showed me what it does to a person, singing for the killing. I won't do that again, not for Valen's larder, not even for my own. So flicked one ear and said nothing at all, which, coming from him, is exactly how he says everything that ever mattered to me out here. But there's the other thing, I went on. Singing to keep mine alive, to put a wall of teeth between Valen and the ones who trust me. That isn't the same. Tell me that isn't the same. He didn't, of course. He just leaned his weight into my leg and stayed. I nodded, to him and to myself. 5 days. I had a symphony to learn. They didn't run from me now. I could stand close and sing, and they'd go on stripping leaves, one ear tipped my way, listening. That was the ground I'd spent days laying, slow as growing a tree. The elephant melody was its own animal. 3 days of trial to find it, lower than the bears, slower, built on a deep rolling beat I felt in my chest more than heard. Bears think slow, elephants think on another clock entirely, and you don't hurry a thing that big. You ask, and you wait, and you ask again the same way. Go there. The biggest one walked where I aimed the note, ponderous, certain. Stop. She carried 3 more steps before she planted, but she planted. Then the one shape the whole plan turned on. Block. She swung broadside across the trail and stood there like a wall that breathed in and out. A wall that breathed, that I could put wherever I sang it. I sat down in the leaf litter and grinned at 4 young giants. The last piece. I finally had my last piece. 4 walls that walked and breathed and obeyed a tune. 3 weeks back, I'd had a single fawn and a borrowed horse. Now the heaviest thing in the whole forest moved when I told it to. That night, I laid out the whole order of battle by the fire, every piece and its job, because in 4 days, I'd have to call all of it from memory, with no time to think. 8 wolves under gray, the attack, the encirclement, the teeth that close a flank. 12 monkeys under fang, disorder, blindness, panic, the helmets and the shrieking. 3 bears, heavy infantry, the wall you don't push through. 4 elephants, the gatebreakers, the blockers, the things no soldier argues with, and around 40 birds, the eyes, the alarm, and the part I hadn't proven yet. 12 melodies. I counted them on the bark, 12 shapes I could call clean and fast. I'd tried for a 13th and lost the lot of them. They bled into each other in my head, so 12 was the wall. Not the wall of what the animals could do. The wall of what one mind could hold, while men were trying to kill it. 27 fighters, 12 songs, and 1 tiring throat. Against 40 trained men, I still believed that night it was only 40, and that number already felt heavy enough to bend my knees under me. With the army set, the ground became the next puzzle, and I worked the gorge the way father worked a blade, studying where it had to bend. I scratched it in the dirt over and over. The entrance first, narrow, 4 men abreast at most, so a column would have to feed in like thread through a needle, its numbers useless the second it stepped inside. The elephants I'd hold just outside the mouth. Once the column was in, they'd swing across the entrance and cork it. No retreat, no reinforcement, whatever came in, stayed in. The middle opened out, and there the wolves took both flanks off the high slopes. The exit pinched again, and there the bears would stand, a dead end made of muscle. Above all of it, the monkeys in the trees, waiting on a single note. And dead center, on the open road, one boy with no weapon. Me. The whole trap was built around a man standing where he looked killable. The architecture was sound. There was just the one part I couldn't draw in dirt. I had to sing all of it. At once. Not one melody, but 5 or 6, layered and overlapping, each shaped for a different animal, each meaning a different thing. Wolves to the flank, monkeys holding, bears sealing, elephants blocking, all on the same breath. But a human throat sings one line at a time. That's the cruel joke of a voice. One mouth, one note. The birds were the answer, the same happy accident that built my recon net. A melody could ride bird to bird, outward, long after my own voice quit, so I gave every species a guide bird and a channel. The wolf line went to wolf birds, monkey line to monkey birds, and the relay carried each command while I moved on to the next. In theory, I could conduct the whole gorge through a relay of feathers, and never once sing 2 full songs with my own breath at the same time. In theory. I had never tested it at full scale. 4 days from a battle is a poor time to learn whether the cleverest idea you've ever had actually works. The first full rehearsal told me, loudly and at length, that it did not work. Not yet anyway, and not by a long stretch of road, so I stood in the center and ran the whole trap for real again. Birds first, alarm down the line, then wolves, monkeys, bears, and finally elephants at the mouth, each answer landing before I dared the next move. The whole machine waking up around me, piece by piece. It took 40 seconds to set. 40. A column of soldiers covers a lot of ground in 40 seconds. By the time my bears sealed the exit, an imaginary Valen would already be halfway back out the entrance and laughing, and my voice betrayed me halfway through. Leading 3 lines, jumping channel to channel, I felt the notes smear, the wolf shape bending toward the bear shape, my throat reaching for 2 things and giving neither clean. The monkeys caught a muddled signal and scrambled up the wrong trees. 40 seconds, and a tangle of beasts. That was my masterpiece. First try. I breathed, and started over. Gray sat through the entire shambles, and watched me with a flat yellow look I had come to know far too well over these last weeks. I'd seen it on the 3 court judges a lifetime ago, right before they decided whether to laugh. I'd seen it on Mira the first morning. Now a wolf gave it to me, flat, level, unimpressed, and I understood it perfectly. It was the look a conductor gets from an orchestra playing every right note in every wrong moment. Patient. Disappointed, waiting for the man with the baton to do his actual job. And that was what I was, I realized, standing there in the dirt with my voice cracking on me. Not a tamer, not a flute at all, a conductor. The wolves, the bears, the shrieking monkeys, the breathing walls, they were the instruments. The song was mine to time, and right then I was timing it badly. It rearranged everything in my head. A tamer forces, a flute gets forced, a conductor does neither. He listens, he times, he trusts each player to be what it is. I'd been forcing a song that only wanted conducting. I hear you, I told Gray. He didn't so much as blink. I'll get the tempo, just give me a few more runs at it. The second run came in at 32 seconds. Better. The channels held a little longer this time before they frayed apart on me again. The third fell apart for the dumbest reason in the history of war. Fang, perched for his cue, leaned too far, lost his grip, and dropped out of a pine straight onto Gray's back. What followed was in no plan. Gray went off like a thrown spear, and Fang went screaming down the whole length of the gorge with a furious wolf 2 feet behind him, scattering my careful positions to the wind. The bears watched it happen. The elephants watched. 40 birds watched the whole undignified circus from the high branches, and not one of them lifted a wing to help. I put my face in my hands. Then I laughed. Actually laughed. The first real one in days, because some things are too stupid to do anything else with. Then I wiped my eyes, called them back, and started again. By the 5th run, it clicked. 22 seconds. Birds, wolves, monkeys, bears, elephants, every piece in place, the channels clean, nobody falling out of a tree. 22 seconds from my first note to a sealed and silent trap. Not perfect, but it worked. 5 runs out of 5, the way the gorge would need it to. 22 seconds. I said the number out loud, like a charm against the dark. from the first note to a sealed stone box, and inside it, 60 men, with nowhere left in the world to go. The night before the battle, I let the camp go quiet and sat at the fire with the Count one final time before it all began. So lay against my leg. Gray was a shadow at the edge of the light. None of them knew what tomorrow was. Only I had to carry that. The birds posted near the enemy had it clear. The company had camped 8 kilometers off, on the north road. They'd break camp at dawn and reach the gorge by mid-morning. 40 soldiers, I thought, and Valen. In a straight fight on open ground, they erase me and my whole forest before noon. I never let myself forget that. My army was weaker, man for tooth, but I wasn't planning a straight fight. The gorge didn't care how many men Valen had. The entrance fit 4 at a time. 40, 600. Past a point the number stops mattering, and only the width of the gap does. Geometry, not strength. That was the whole bet. I'd spent my life being the weaker thing. I knew exactly how the weaker thing wins. It picks the ground. My whole life had taught me the lesson in advance. The weak thing never wins the open field. It wins by choosing where the field is. I'd just never had the gift to choose it this well before. There was one crack in the whole plan, and I'd known it from the very start. Valen had to come inside the gorge of his own free will. If he was careful, if he stopped at the mouth, smelled the trap, sat down to wait me out, or simply put the woods to the torch, the gorge was worthless. A trap only works on a thing that walks into it. I needed 60 men, and the man leading them, to choose the open road through the stone. So the bait couldn't just be a rumor Brecht carried. It had to be me. At the right moment I'd stand at the entrance myself, in plain sight, the runaway flute, alone and shaking, then turn and walk deeper in, like prey too stupid to run the right way. Valen wouldn't send men after that. He'd come himself. He'd told Brecht as much, told the whole court. The singer is mine to break. His pride had already written my plan for me. All I had to do was hold the door open and let him be exactly who he'd always been. That sounded simple until night fell. I was banking the fire when a bird came down from the enemy post, agitated, and gave me the count it had watched all evening. I read the bird's panic twice over, just to be certain of the count. Then I sat very still beside the fire for a while. Not 40, 60. Valen hadn't ridden out with 40 men. Somewhere between the order and the march, he'd added 20 more, half again, as many swords, walking the north road toward my gorge in the dark. Brecht had said 40, maybe more. Well, the maybe more had a hard number on it now, and the number was 60 men. 20 more swords didn't change the geometry by an inch. The gap was still 4 men wide. But 20 more meant more minutes of singing, and my throat had a floor. I had just moved the fight closer to it than I liked. I looked at my 27, wolves asleep in a pile, monkeys tangled in a tree, elephants like hills, so breathing slow against my leg beside me. 27, 12 songs, 1 throat, against 60 trained men, and the noble who'd named me an instrument. I added the new number to the plan and felt it strain, like a rope taking more weight than it was spun for. Then I put another log on the fire and sat with it. 60. Fine. The gap in the stone was still only 4 men wide, and that was all that mattered. Behind me, up the slopes, and in the trees and back in the shadows, 27 animals held their places and waited on a boy who hadn't slept. The birds had fed me the column's progress all morning. 2 kilometers. 1. Then hooves on the road. And Valen came first, of course, because a proud man rides at the front of his triumph. He sat a tall horse in a coat the color of dried blood, 60 men strung out behind him beneath snapping banners and road dust lifting around them. When he saw me, his whole face eased into something almost pleased, as if the forest had finally remembered its proper place beneath his boots. "There you are," he said. He reined up a dozen paces off and looked me over, the ragged runaway, shaking in the cold. "Alone?" "Alone," I said. And it was true. Right there, at the mouth of the stone, there wasn't another living thing in sight but me. The truest lie I ever told. His eyes went past me, into the gorge, and narrowed. Stupid was never one of Valen's faults. He smelled it. I watched him smell it. So I gave the suspicion nothing to chew on. I didn't beg. I didn't bolt. I turned my back on 60 armed men, the rudest thing you can do to a soldier, and walked, slow and tired, deeper into the gorge. An invitation. Come and get me. Too beaten to even run properly. It worked the way I'd hoped. A man who runs looks like a trap. A man who shuffles into a dead end looks like exactly what Valen had been promised. A broken boy with nowhere left to go. "You. And you. Take the front," Valen called. "Bring him to me." He stayed on his horse at the mouth, where it was safe, where a careful man stays. 20 soldiers peeled off and came in after me, swords out, 4 abreast, because 4 abreast was all the stone allowed, 4 wide. I'd built my whole plan down to those 2 words. I kept my back to them and felt the gorge close its jaw an inch. I stopped in the center, where the walls stood highest, and turned to face them. 20 men filling the narrow road, slowing as they saw the boy had stopped running and started smiling. Then I sang. Not loud. I didn't need loud. The first notes went up to the birds, and the birds carried them down every channel at once, and the gorge came alive around 20 soldiers who thought they were alone with one boy. The wolves came first, and the worst of it for the soldiers was that they came silent. No growl, no warning. 8 gray shapes just stepped out of the shadow on both flanks and stood there. A man's nerve breaks faster at a quiet wolf than a loud one. Then the monkeys dropped. Helmets yanked down over eyes, shields torn loose, a spear pulled clean out of a man's hands and flung up a tree. 20 trained soldiers became 20 blind men slapping at the air in about 4 seconds, and behind them, at the far pinch of the gorge, 3 bears stood up, the way back, gone. It was not a beautiful battle. It was managed chaos, and I was the one managing it, note by note, in the middle of the storm. From the mouth, Valen watched his 20 dissolve into a flailing knot, and the soldiers still beside him stopped dead, looking at each other, deciding they wanted no part of whatever this was. A wiser man reads those faces and pulls back. I'd bet everything on Valen not being that man, and Valen paid out. Cowards. Follow me. He drew his sword and spurred straight in, because a noble cannot be seen to flinch while his men do, and his pride cost him the instant he chose it. He'd forgotten the first thing I ever learned about myself. Horses hear me. All of them. Always. I bent one thread of the song toward the big animal under him, and Valen's own horse quit listening to its master. It planted mid-stride, screamed, and reared so hard he nearly went off the back of his fine saddle, clawing the reins, suddenly just a man fighting to stay on a horse that had picked a new commander. That was the cue I'd been holding back, the last channel, the one I'd never used in a real fight before Valen cornered me in daylight. Out past the mouth of the gorge, where the soldiers thought they still had the open road, the trees came apart with impossible patience and weight. 4 elephants walked out of the forest into the gap, slow and enormous, and turned broadside across the entrance, a wall that breathed, just as I'd sung it, just as she'd done it on the trail. The men outside spun to run, and found 4 living hills where the road home used to be. The men inside were blind and ringed with wolves, and Valen sat in the middle on a horse that hated him. The entrance corked, the exit walled, 60 soldiers and their proud commander sealed in a stone box by a boy and his choir. The fight went out of the gorge by inches. You could see the exact moment it left each man, shoulders dropping, sword going heavy in the hand, the math arriving. Valen climbed off his useless horse before it threw him, then stood in the churn of his broken company and counted the animals at his back. I watched the word reach his face before he said it, because pride always understands a trap one breath after everyone else already has understood it. It was a trap, he said, quiet, mostly to himself. I walked to him, on foot, unarmed, through a gorge full of teeth that parted to let me through and closed behind me. I stopped close enough to see the sweat on him. Flute, I said. He looked at me. You said it, at the pens. You called me a flute, a thing that only plays when you press it. I've thought about that word every day since. Look around, Valen. Listen. Does this sound like a flute to you? He didn't answer. There was no court here, no crowd, no one to perform for. Just the 2 of us and the truth, and 60 men learning it the hard way. The rest, the part with witnesses, could wait. It took about 20 minutes for 60 men to put down their weapons. Surrender goes one at a time, one sword drops, the man beside him sees the world didn't end, and his drops, and so on down the line until it's done. I could have ended it faster. That's the part I need you to understand. One change of melody and the wolves stop ringing and start tearing. The bears stop blocking and start breaking. I had 60 men in a box, and the only thing keeping every one of them breathing was the shape of the note I chose to hold. So I held the capture song: surround, pin, hold, never attack. Not once. I'd sung for the killing already, in Valen's pens, and I'd promised a fawn I was done with that. 60 men walked into my gorge to take my head. 60 men sat down in the dirt and lived. Both of those are true, and I made them true on purpose, with my mouth, one careful note at a time. It wasn't clean though. I'll be honest about that, because the stories always lie about this part. In the thick of it, before the helmets went on, one soldier got a swing in. Fang, who can never resist the middle of everything, took the edge of it across one arm. Not deep enough. He came to me after holding it up, looking betrayed by the entire concept of swords. And gray. Somewhere in the flank rush, a soldier slashed blind and caught him along the ribs. He walked out of the gorge with a red line down his gray side, head high, pretending it was nothing. I sat them both down and bound the wounds with strips of my own shirt while the prisoners watched. My hands weren't steady. These weren't units on a bark map. This was Gray, who doubted me and then chosen me. This was Fang, who hid behind my legs. The first blood my family ever shed, and I felt every drop. When the binding was done and the prisoners sat in a long quiet row, I did the count, because I always do the count. And this one, I'll carry the rest of my life. 60 prisoners, 0 dead, theirs and mine both. 2 wounded, Gray and Fang, and both would mend if I kept my head clear and my hands steady. The number that scared me most was all 12 melodies, run at once, layered through the birds for the better part of an hour without breaking. My voice had thinned at the edges, gone rough as bark, but it held, all the way to the end. I'd found the ceiling of what I could do, and stood on it through a whole battle without falling off. 12 songs, 1 throat, 60 swords, and not a single grave. I sat down beside my wounded wolf and let myself shake for a minute, now that it was safe to. I was still sitting there when the brush at the gorge mouth crashed, and a horse came through hard, and it was Mira, low over its neck, riding like the message couldn't wait a second longer. She'd come herself. She pulled up at the edge of the wreckage. 60 bound soldiers, a noble in the dirt, wolves and bears, and 4 elephants standing easy in the morning light, and she just stopped. Took it all in, forgot whatever she'd ridden so hard to say. I came to warn you, she finally got out. It's 60. Valen left with 60, not 40, I thought. She looked at the rows of prisoners. I'm late. You're late, I agreed. Did you manage? I looked at Gray's bound side, at Fang cradling his arm, at So stepping out from the rocks where I'd kept him safe. The animals managed, I said. I just kept the time. She didn't smile. She looked at Valen tied at my feet, then back at me, and her voice dropped low. Then we move. Now. To the gates. Before the king hears his warhound never came home. I did not let myself enjoy the first crack in Valen's face, because that was exactly how fools lost battles they had already won. Pride was a bad commander, and I had seen enough of his to know the smell, so I kept counting until the numbers steadied me. Wolves left ridge, wolves right ridge, monkeys above the broken pines, bears behind the shelf, birds circling where my eyes could not reach at all. Every answer came back clean. The best part was also the ugliest part, because Valen's soldiers were not monsters from a story in old ink. They were tired men with shields, orders, and fear pressed under their helmets, and I needed them beaten without making them dead for him today. That meant every melody had to land soft and precise. A wrong note could turn a horse wild, send a soldier under a tusk, or make Fang lunge before Gray finished circling. My fingers wanted to tremble. I let them tremble for one breath, then I put the flute to my mouth and used the fear as rhythm. Fear was useful if I made it carry weight. When the first squad dropped their spears, I did not shout victory. I pointed 2 fingers down and gave the wolves the release note. Teeth moved away from throats like doors closing gently. The monkeys celebrated early because of course they did. One leapt onto a captain's helmet, raised both arms, and nearly ruined my entire serious battlefield image. I pretended not to see it. Valen saw it. His face twisted. Not because of the monkey, but because his men laughed for half a second while being defeated. That tiny laugh hurt him worse than a blade. Good, I thought. Let him understand the shape of this defeat. He had marched here to erase a forest boy, and the forest had made him look ridiculous in front of his own banner. The elephants did not move like an army. They moved like a wall, deciding it was tired of being scenery. When they sealed the gorge, every soldier behind Valen understood the trap at once. I lowered the flute only after the last spear touched dirt. My mouth tasted like copper, my lungs burned, and my hands were numb from holding one mistake away from disaster. That was the moment I finally looked at Fang. He was standing, but one foreleg was shaking. Gray pressed shoulder to his side as if daring him to fall without permission. I wanted to run to them. I wanted to forget Valen, the prisoners, the court, all of it. Instead, I finished the surrender count, because mercy also needed discipline from me. I made that choice standing in the gorge, and I made it on purpose. No more crawling through holes in walls at night. I'd come into this city once as a thing to be laughed at. This time I'd come to the capital where everyone could see. So led, which was not my idea at all, and somehow that made it worse for my pride. The young stag walked at the head of the column like he'd been born to it, and behind him came a whole herd of deer. They drifted out of the trees to fall in step, something I had not called, and still could not explain without feeling watched by the forest. His kin. Her kin. I stopped trying to understand it and let them lead. Then the wolves, low and easy at my flanks. The monkeys swinging through the trees along the road, keeping pace overhead. The bears, and the 4 elephants last, the size of houses, shaking the road with every step. A boy, a girl on a horse, and an army nobody in that kingdom had a word for, walking up the main road in broad daylight. The news ran faster than we did. We passed the first farms by mid-morning, and the people in the fields straightened up one by one and went still. Nobody screamed. You don't scream at 4 elephants. The body skips past fear, into something quieter. They set down their tools and watched us pass without pretending not to stare. By the second village, the word had already arrived ahead of us, carried mouth to mouth down the road faster than any horse could have managed. I heard it before I understood they meant me. 3 words, passed hand to hand like a torch. The Beast Conductor is coming. Not the flute, not the runaway, not the king's living whistle. Something new, a name the road had made for me while I wasn't looking. I'd spent 17 years being called useless, 1 season in the woods, and the whole kingdom had a different word to learn. Mira rode beside me the whole way. For a long stretch, she said nothing. Then she did. "You understand what happens at that throne," she said. "Either you walk out free, or you don't walk out." "I understand." "And it doesn't scare you? You're about to stand in front of the king who put a price on your head and tell him how things are going to go. Anyone sane would be terrified." I gave her an honest answer because she'd earned one. Singing in an empty hall scared me more. Singing for my father, who'd stopped listening, standing before 40 people who already knew I was nothing. That's the fear I never beat. This is just arithmetic, and the numbers are mine now. She looked at me a while longer. Then she faced the road, and I think for the first time she believed I'd live. The gates came up at noon, the same gates that shut in my face the night I arrived with nothing. Brecht was on the wall. I saw him see the column, the deer, the wolves, the elephants filling the road behind me. I saw him find my face in all of it. He didn't reach for the gate, he didn't shout an order. He reached up, slow, took off his helmet, held it against his chest, and looked at me the way you look at something you got badly wrong. I stopped beneath him. For a moment, neither of us said the thing we were both remembering. "The contest? You? In that?" "I remember you," Brecht said finally. No bluster left in it. "I remember you too," I said. No anger in it either. Just true. We'd both been there that night. We both knew exactly what had changed, and neither of us needed to say it any louder. Nobody closed the gate. The men beside Brecht took one look at the elephants and decided this was a day for stepping aside, not dying at a post, so I rode in. Through the front gate, in daylight, the whole forest at my back. The same arch I'd been turned away from, in rags. The streets did what streets do. People froze in doorways. Children broke from their mothers and ran to the road's edge to see the wolves, the way children always run toward the thing that should frighten them. Merchants came out and forgot their stalls. Nobody threw anything. Nobody laughed. The city that laughed me out watched me come back in, and this time it was silent. We went straight for the palace, and the streets opened ahead of us like water. The few guards who started forward measured what was coming up the avenue and found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. An elephant is a persuasive argument against heroics. At the throne room doors the guards held, the way men hold when they fear the king behind them more than the wolves in front. Mira swung down and went to them. I don't know what she said. Something about what waited outside if those doors stayed shut, and which side of this day they wanted to be on. The doors opened. The throne room was smaller than I remembered. Funny, how rooms that loomed over you shrink once you stop being afraid of them. King Edric sat the high seat, advisors fanned around him, a handful of courtiers frozen against the walls. He watched me come up the long floor, me, then Grey at my heel, then the citizens crowding in at the doors behind. He'd already done the arithmetic. He was a clever man. That I'd always granted him. "You," he said. "Me." The hall held its breath. "You came to my throne with an army," Edric said, evenly. "There's a word for that. Treason. I came to take back what you took," I said. "And to end this. Call it whatever helps you sign." They brought Valen in then, bound, up the length of the hall in front of the king, the advisors, the courtiers, and the citizens packed in the doorway. He'd had hours to break, and he'd used them badly. When he saw the room, saw me standing free at the foot of the throne while he came in on a rope, something in his face came apart. "This is impossible," he said, "to the court, the king, anyone. He's nobody, an exile, a peasant, a flute." "Flute," I said. The word stopped him. The whole hall went still around it. "My father said something to me, the day he threw me out of my own village," I told him. Quiet, every face in the room leaning in to catch it. In front of everyone he said, "I couldn't raise you, so let nature finish the job. Go." I let it sit. I've thought about those words every day since. And standing here, looking at you, I finally found the man they fit. "Let nature raise you, Valen. Go." Nobody laughed, nobody spoke. The king said nothing. In a hall built for grand voices, the loudest thing in it was the silence, after a quiet boy turned his father's curse into a sentence. Valen looked around for someone to save him and found the truth instead. Wolves sitting in the great doorway, calm as dogs at a hearth. Through the tall windows, the shapes of elephants in the palace yard, and out there with them, 60 of his own soldiers, disarmed, sitting in rows under the eye of a single fox. I watched the last of it land. He'd called these animals food, a resource. He'd made me sing them to the slaughter for 2,000 gold a month. That sentence alone should have ended every excuse in the room. The day he forced me to watch a doe die in the grass was the day he built the thing now standing in the king's doorway. He made this army. Every wolf, every elephant, every silent deer. He just didn't know it until the rope was on his wrists. I saw him understand. That was enough. I didn't need to say it. I turned back to Edric and kept it short. "A man with 60 of your soldiers in your yard doesn't need a long speech. 3 things," I said. 1. A charter, sealed by the crown. No beast in this kingdom is hunted for sport, sold for fur, or driven into a pen again. The hunting scheme ends today, in writing. 2. Valen, gone, not killed. I'd watched enough killing, exiled, stripped, sent out the way he sent me, let him learn the woods. 3. My freedom, no price on my head, no charge of treason. I walk out of here a free man, and so does everyone who followed me. Edric looked at the wolves in his doorway a long moment, then he called for the seal, and he signed. The Charter of the Beasts, the king's own mark pressed into the wax. Valen was walked out of the hall under the eyes of the whole court. No execution, no pardon. Just the doors, and the road, and the trees. I didn't watch him go. I'd already given him the only words I had for him. The hall stayed quiet after that, but it was a different quiet now, not fear exactly. More like everyone had heard a lock open and was afraid to move first. Idrik pressed the seal again, harder than he needed to, until red wax squeezed around the crown mark. That little sound did more than any speech. Mira stepped forward and read the first line aloud. Not grandly, just clear enough for the courtiers at the walls and the citizens in the doorway. No beast in the kingdom was crown property. No noble had hunting rights over the forest by birth. No pen, no drive, no slaughterhouse order without public charge. The words were dry as old bread. I loved them anyway. Dry words with a king's seal could stop wet knives if enough people watched them land. Someone in the doorway repeated the line about the forest. Then someone else did. The sentence moved backward through the crowd, changing shape, getting shorter. By the time it reached the palace yard, it had become simpler. The beasts are free. Then, a breath later, so is the boy from the road. I looked at Edric while it spread. He heard it too. A king can sign parchment in private, but he cannot unsay what a city hears together. For one heartbeat, I thought he might hate me for that. Then he looked past me at the wolves and the open doors and chose being practical. A practical king survives. I could respect that much, not love it, not forgive it neatly, but understand the shape of it without lying to myself. Brecht stood by the inner doors, helmet under one arm, watching Valen disappear down the corridor. His face had no victory in it, only tired understanding. Good. I did not want cheering there. Valen's exile was punishment, not a festival. The court had laughed enough at men being thrown out into darkness. When I turned, so was waiting at the threshold. Head high, the herd gathered beyond him in the yard, like the forest had sent witnesses of its own. Gray moved first. Fang copied him badly. The monkeys tried to steal an ink knife from a clerk, because apparently history needed balance, and one final bad idea. That was when the hall finally breathed. Not applause, not yet, just breath. The sound of people discovering they had survived the truth and could still choose differently. I'd sent the army out past the wall the moment the charter was sealed. A throne room is no place for wolves once the point is made. Only So stayed, close at my side, the way he always is. Mira found me there. You could have stayed, she said. You had him. You could have demanded more. More of what? Anything. Coin. A title, a seat on his council, a share of the thing you just beat out of him. He'd have given it. The whole court saw he'd have given it. No, I said. Why not? She wasn't arguing. She honestly wanted to know. Most men spend their whole lives clawing for what you just turned down in one breath. Because it isn't my place, I said. I didn't do any of this to sit in that hall. I did it so nobody could ever make me sing for the wrong reasons again. She was quiet a moment. Then, softer. And where is your place then? I didn't answer right away. I wasn't being mysterious. I just wanted to say it out loud once and have it be true. So I gave her the count instead. The last one. The whole thing, start to finish, because she'd been there for more of it than anyone. When I came through that gate the first time, I had nothing, I said. 0 coins, no allies, no way to feed myself for a day. 1 knife my father slipped in my bag, and a voice the whole village was ashamed of. I ticked the rest off on my fingers, slow. Now? 8 wolves, 12 monkeys, 3 bears, 4 elephants, 40 birds that are my eyes for 5 kilometers, 12 songs I can call in my sleep, a camp in the trees behind a wall the beavers built, a charter with a king's seal on it, and 210 gold I've still never spent. Mira almost smiled at that last part. Almost. And here's what I don't have, I went on, because a count that only adds is a lie. Not one human soldier, no love at court, they'll fear me, not cheer me, and that's fine. And no way home. The village is still the village. My father is still my father. That door didn't open just because the others did. Is that all right? She asked. I thought about it honestly. It's all right, I said. And it was. Not perfect. Not a song with a tidy last note. But all right, and earned, and mine. We walked to the gate together. The same gate. Before I left, Mira made 3 copies of the charter and placed one under the court seal, one with Brecht, and one in my hands. The paper felt too clean for what it carried. No cages, no hunts, no noble claiming a forest life because his pride needed fresh teeth. I asked who would enforce it when I was gone. Mira said the court would, then saw my face and corrected herself before I could answer. The court would obey because it had watched what disobedience cost. Not fear forever, maybe, but fear long enough for the first new habit to form. That was uglier than the songs I wanted to believe in, and more honest than the speeches nobles like to give themselves after surviving consequences. I kept the gold listed, not loved. It meant medicine, grain, rope, winter cloth, and repairs to a wall made by beavers who deserved better tools. Funny thing about treasure, once I had people and animals to protect, coins stopped looking like freedom and started looking like unfinished chores waiting everywhere. That felt ridiculous and honest at the same time, which was becoming a theme in my life. Victory did not end hunger, it only gave me better tools. So when Mira asked one last time if I truly wanted nothing else, I could answer without flinching. I wanted the road open behind me. There's a kind of justice in a story that keeps dragging you back to the same few places to measure how far you've come. Brecht was on the post. Of course he was. The man had been the doorman to every important moment of my life in this city, whether either of us wanted it. I stopped in front of him. Neither of us reached for old words. We'd said them already, up on that wall, with an army at my back. He just nodded, once, a soldier's nod, the kind you give an equal, not a beggar. Then he stepped aside from the gate he'd once slammed in my face, and let me walk out of the city on my own 2 feet. "Will you come back?" Mira asked at the threshold. "Sometimes," I said. "Someone has to make sure the king keeps his word. And the horses miss me." She smiled then, finally. "They do," she said. "Go on, Beast Conductor, before the children form a parade." So, I went. I left her at the gate, the one person in that whole city who'd looked at me the first morning and seen a person instead of a problem. Some debts you don't pay off. You just carry them gladly. The road out was empty, and the second the wall was behind me, I started to sing, low, easy, just to call them in. The trees answered. So bolted ahead first, all legs, glad to be out of the stone city and back where the ground was soft under him again at last. Then Gray slid out of the brush and took his place on my left without being asked, the way he had since the gorge battle. My left is Gray's, that's settled. The bears came lumbering, and the elephants made the road tremble behind them, like distant weather all over again. The monkeys poured down through the branches, and Fang found a fallen branch twice his size, deciding it was vital to the war effort for exactly 4 steps. He dragged it 4 steps, then dropped it the instant something more interesting blinked, which was probably the most Fang victory possible after everything we survived. I laughed. After everything, it still got me. An army that brought a kingdom to terms, and its second in command couldn't hold onto a stick. This was the part nobody at court would ever understand. To them, I'd walked out with monsters. To me, I'd just walked out with my own. The wolves, the chaos, the breathing walls, they weren't a weapon I'd picked up. They were where I belonged. Mira had asked where my place was. This was the answer, following me into the trees, on 4 legs and 40 wings. On the forest road, I passed a merchant with a cart, and I knew him before he knew himself. The same traveling man who'd nailed a notice to a tree one night, months ago, and walked off without once looking at the boy who'd been about to do something terrible beneath it. He didn't know me now. Why would he? Last he'd seen, if he'd seen at all, I was a ruin in the dark. Now I had wolves at my heel, and he gave those a wide, careful berth and kept his eyes low. "You hear about the Beast Conductor?" he said, making the nervous talk men make near things that frighten them. "I've heard," I said. "They say he's from a smith village. Gornet, I think. There's a smith there, Goran. Word is he lost his boy a few months back. Ran off or worse, nobody's sure which." I kept my voice level. "How is he?" "The smith?" The man shrugged. "Forges. Doesn't talk. Same as he ever was, they say." I nodded. I didn't tell him who I was. I didn't turn the cart around and ride for Gornet. Some doors you leave shut on purpose, at least for now. Maybe one day I'd stand in that square again, and maybe my father would set down his hammer and actually hear the song this time. Maybe, not today. "Safe road," I told the merchant, and walked on with my forest, and left my father forging in his silence, the way he'd always said he wanted it. That evening, I was back at the camp, at my own fire. The whole strange family of us settled around it, so dozing, Gray a shadow at the tree line. The first quiet night in a long time, and I let myself have it. The bird ruined it. It came in from the east, and the sound it made was wrong. Not the flat all clear, not the spike of a patrol or a deer, something I'd never heard in all my months of reading them. A high, ragged note with real terror packed into it. I stood up, so lifted his head. Gray was already on his feet, ears pinned east, staring into the dark like it had teeth. Then a second bird came fast and ragged from the same direction. Then a third. All from the east, all carrying the same broken alarm down the line, faster and faster, post to post through my net. Soon, the whole eastern arc of my net was screaming about something none of them had a name for, and my skin went cold under the firelight. I looked where they were looking. Out past the trees, low on the horizon, the sky had gone an ugly orange, not the soft glow of a campfire, not a hearth. Fire, a great deal of it, the kind that eats villages whole. I pulled out the stolen map and put my finger on the east, and my stomach dropped. East wasn't forest. East wasn't a village I could warn, or a road I knew. East was the border, the edge of the next kingdom over where maps got thin. Then the lead bird came down and landed on my hand, and I knew this was no accident before I saw the paper in its beak. The scrap was rolled tight, damp from flight, and tied with black thread that did not belong to any trader I knew on our road. I unrolled it by the firelight. 3 words, in a language I had never seen, in no alphabet I knew, and beneath them, a drawing, an animal, a beast I had no name for, that no forest of mine had ever held. It was big. From the scale sketched beside it, it was very, very big. I looked at Gray. Gray looked east. And somewhere out past that burning horizon, something had just heard that there was a boy in these woods who could call the beasts, and it had sent me the first line of a song I didn't know yet.
This story is not only about a boy who can command animals with his voice, it is about a person who was called useless, thrown away, used by powerful people, and still found a way to decide what his gift was truly for. Kai first used his voice to survive, then watched others turn it into a tool for greed, and finally chose to make it a shield instead of a chain. That is why this video has value. It reminds us that talent by itself is not freedom. Freedom begins when you choose the purpose of your own power and refuse to let others define your worth. Kai did not become strong by becoming cruel. He became strong by protecting what trusted him, by learning the rhythm of his strange army, and by turning the insult they gave him into a name the whole kingdom had to respect. So think about this while you watch. Are you using your gift for your own path, or are you letting someone else play you like an instrument? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like if you want more stories where the weakest person in the room becomes impossible to ignore.